listen to reason? Will you open your eyes?
I don't want to soapbox too much. We got Jonathan in Arlington. How are you?
Hey, I'm pretty good.
You're on the line.
This is my second time calling. I enjoy your show.
Thank you.
The reason I was calling was, first of all, I'm a theist caller. Much like the previous caller, I believe in a God that is unfalsifiable. In other words, can't be demonstrated.
And do you have any good reason why you would believe in anything that's unfalsifiable?
Well, my primary reason is that's how I was raised. So that's my, in a sense, default position. From there, from watching your show and from doing research, I gradually transitioned from the fundamentalist belief as far as holding the Bible as being the inspired word of God, and I'm kind of transitioning to the middle. And before crossing over, I'm in this position of belief in an unfalsifiable God, if that makes sense.
Well, it does and it doesn't. I mean, it makes sense in the sense that I've heard other people say this before, and it doesn't make sense in that I have a really hard time grasping how anybody can both understand that they believe something that they don't have a good reason for, and actually still believe it.
Well, that's the reason why I was indoctrinated. That's how I was indoctrinated in that belief. But the reason why I still believe it is because, I mean, it provides hope, it provides happiness for me. And to
Sure.
me, that's a good reason.
I've heard that quite a few times, but my question is, don't you care whether it's actually true? Because if it's not true, does it really matter that it's providing hope, and isn't that false hope?
No, I do care if it's true. But when it's concerning something that's unfalsifiable, the truth to me is kind of moot because I can't ascertain that truth in this life. The belief that the God that I believe in is a God that is the creator of existence, and that I will meet upon my death after I die. And that's something that, while I do care about the truth of that claim, it's unfalsifiable. I can't demonstrate. I can't examine what happens to me after I die.
But you're kind of shifting the burden of proof. You're saying that you're justified in believing it because it can't be disproved. Are you going to go around believing every God hypothesis that can't be disproved?
Not just because it can't be disproved. Because it can't be disproved is the foundation, and because it makes me happy and it doesn't harm anybody. Those three tenets are the foundation of why I believe in it. Because it can't be disproved, it's unfalsifiable. It makes me happy, and it also is benign. It doesn't affect anybody else.
Okay, I'll let you go right after this. I reject your claim that it doesn't hurt anybody. I would argue that it's actually hurting you, and that by accepting a proposition that you don't know to be true, you are limiting the options on your ability to discover what's actually true. And there are countless things that provide hope. And if you're actually concerned about whether or not it's true, I'd think that you'd take the steps to try and find out. But I know Tracie wanted to.
I was just going to say that accepting unfalsifiable things as true is not reasonable. I mean, that's my only point.
Yeah, I mean, just as a matter of definition, you're being
There's a
irrational.
difference between saying I have reasons which are sort of like causes for why you believe it, like it makes me happy, versus reasons that are reasonable, logical premises that lead to the belief.
The definition for logic is just a particular method of reasoning. So this is my method of reasoning. Whether you agree with it.
No, I'm talking about there's two different ways people use the word reason. You know, there may be like I can say, if somebody says to me, you know, why did all these people die in the plane crash, and I say, well, the reason is the engine failed. That's not really answering their question of, you know, was there some reason, meaning was there like an intent behind this. So when people use the word reason, they sometimes have different meanings. And when we have, there are certain things that people can believe that seem to make no sense, and we'll see someone do something and it seems really senseless. I have no doubt that there's like an addiction, for example, it would be a good example of something for which there are underlying causes, but it's not actually like a conscious, reasonable thing to do, that you've got like these reasonable steps that are making sense and this is why you're doing it to reach this goal and blah, blah. It's not like that. There's like underlying causes for it, but it's an unreasonable thing because it actually destroys your life.
Well, you said destroys your life, and Matt, you also...
Addiction I'm talking about. I'm talking about, I was using addiction as an example to just say that this is something where there are actually causes for why the person would employ a thing that hurts them. But in reality, it's when you're talking about reasonable, as in, does the person have a good explanation for why they would do this to themselves? They don't.
But Matt, you specifically said you think it's harmful, correct?
Addiction is. I was just simply
Well,
using.
he's talking about what I said.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking to
I'm
Matt?
sorry.
Yeah, I did. Actually, I'll hit a couple things real quick. One of the things that you started to say before we kind of interrupted you was that this is your own logic. You know, that okay, great. You can have your own quote-unquote logic, but you might as well be asserting that you have your own reality, in which case you've now divorced yourself from any sort of reasonable discussion. There isn't independent logics. I don't have my logic and you have your logic. There's just logical reasoning, and there's just the truth in the sense that we actually share truth and exist in the same universe. But where I'm saying that I find it harmful is you'd like to believe that the beliefs you hold don't affect anybody else and don't hurt anybody else. And I'd say that not only is that irrelevant if it's hurting you, but it's also untrue. Your beliefs don't live in a vacuum. Your beliefs have consequences. They affect your actions, they affect the decisions you make, and your decisions and your actions have consequences for yourself and for other people. You don't live as the only person on a planet. And so knowingly believing something that is irrational and trying to pretend that it doesn't affect anything is itself harmful, not to mention the harm that you're ignoring. It may be minor things. I'm not saying that this is going to lead you, to be, raping people or murdering people or destroying. It's little harms, but they accumulate. And my thing is that I fail to see why somebody would knowingly be irrational and knowingly take risks about the truth when we have ways of living that don't require people to accept things without justification.
Well, there's two things I kind of want to talk about. The first thing is when you said it's possibly harmful because now I'm in other words, if I just accept God as being true because it's unfalsifiable and it makes me happy, then I exclude myself from finding truth, and I don't see that as being mutually exclusive. I can see a scenario where I can still use scientific evidence for things which I consider falsifiable, things which can be observed. While also,
no, you're excluding yourself from finding out the truth of that question.
Oh, of that question.
Yeah. You've accepted a position without reason, and so at the point when you accept a proposition as true, that's the point at which you stop looking for the actual answer.
But if that proposition, if we can both come to an agreement that proposition is unfalsifiable,
we can't though. The question of whether or not a God exists is not a proposition that I necessarily accept as falsifiable. You said that you believe in a God that you are unfalsifiable.
Yeah,
you said that you believe in a God that's unfalsifiable. That's fine. My question is the bigger issue of does a God actually exist is not something that is necessarily unfalsifiable under every definition. But if it is, then the only rational position is to not accept that the claim is true. Otherwise, if you're going to be consistent and rational, how many other unsupported, unfalsifiable claims would you have to accept as true? You would be putting yourself in the position of being forced to either accept conflicting views or to cherry pick and pick the one that you like, which is what you've said you've done.
But why shouldn't one accept something that's unfalsifiable? And you said I'm defining the God that I believe in because that makes it easy for everybody to be on the same page with this God.
You said you cared whether or not this was true.
I do care if it's true. And
then why would you accept something before you knew that it was true?
Because for me, I should believe that God exists, or I should believe that there is a God because, number one, it's true that it makes me happy as well. So there's more than just one truth of whether or not that God actually exists.
No, there's one truth. It's either a God exists or a God does not exist. That's it. Whether it makes you happy is a separate question. You said you cared about truth, and I'm talking about the truth of whether or not a God exists. You're accepting that a God exists while acknowledging that you cannot possibly discern this truth, and you're doing it because it makes you happy.
But why?
Maybe somebody. What if somebody proposed to you that heroin was good for you, and you decided to accept that because taking heroin makes you happy?
Well, that could be demonstrated that it's not good for you.
I understand. I'm sorry that I picked something that's actually, demonstrable. But it doesn't make any difference. If your primary reason is doing it because it makes you happy and you don't care whether or not it has been or could be justifiable, then you are in exactly the same position.
That is not my primary reason. That's my primary reason when it cannot be proven, when it cannot be examined.
So for anything
that can be examined.
So for anything that can't be proven, you're willing to accept that it's true as long as it makes you feel good.
As long as it makes me feel good and it doesn't harm others.
Why would you do that? Hang on. As long as it makes you feel good and it doesn't harm others?
For instance, I could say, well, it might make you feel good to go kill other people. And this is based on the assumption that pleasure is
Why do you
pain.
think that what you believe doesn't have any kind of impact on others? It's making me sad that you're irrational. You are harming me.
Well, even non-belief is a sort of belief. I mean, you could say everything affects others. You believe that you shouldn't believe.
No.
That can affect others right there.
My position is that beliefs should be reserved until evidence supports the claim.
Do you believe that?
Yes.
Well, even so, that belief can affect others. Everything can affect others.
Yes.
That's my point.
Yeah.
And you have to be reasonable about whether you think it harms others. And I'm not saying it 100% it doesn't harm anybody.
There we go. Now you've gotten rid of this doesn't harm people. So what level of harm are you going to tolerate in your irrational beliefs?
Well, I'm sorry, hold on for a second. This is based upon assumptions that pleasure is preferable to pain, and I don't have a gauge for what's the pleasure scale or what's the pain scale.
Sure.
So obviously it takes some common sense. So I'm not saying it doesn't affect anybody at all, but I'm comparing it to religious beliefs where they actually go bomb buildings and it makes them happy. That
Sure.
harms people. So
your religious beliefs are better than the people who are calling for jihads. Big whoop.